1X Developer Podcast.
All right. Welcome back to the 1X Developer Podcast. This is Brendan.
I'm Colin.
Today we're going to be talking about if we could learn programming all over again, or if we're going to teach programming to someone else, where would we start? I think, I think there's a lot of different ways to go about programming, and I think that my thoughts on this have kind of changed, maybe even in just the last couple of years.
It's something I think a lot about, because there are a lot of ways to go about it, and it seems like something that most people, a lot of people have strong opinions about it, it seems. And I think when you ask most developers what their story is, most of them will say, oh, I don't really have the typical story. You know, you hear that a lot.
Yeah.
And it's like, I guess maybe there isn't a typical story. Maybe we're all just people who push buttons on the computer and figured it out.
I think there's a lot of paths to it, yeah.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons there's a lot of paths to it is because it's so easy to do at home on your own. You can just, unlike a lot of other things, you can just kind of do it by yourself at home. You can't do that you can't learn to direct movies that way. You know what I mean? You can watch movies and you can study and stuff, but you can't actually direct a movie without getting involved with other people and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that is a really interesting aspect of it, because really all you need is a computer and probably internet access. I guess technically not, but probably you really do.
Yeah.
But that's really all you need. You don't need anyone to show you the ropes. You don't need anyone to introduce you to it, to teach you. You can just kind of start doing it.
Yeah. I mean, that's more or less how I learned, and I would say I'm a big fan of that in general. I think up until fairly recently, I would say that for that reason, I would encourage everyone to learn a little bit of programming, partly because it's just everywhere, right? Like my barbecue grill has computers in it. It has Bluetooth and stuff. It's just so, programming or computers are so pervasive that I think it's really important to learn a little bit about programming. I think really helps you navigate the modern world.
I think I would agree. And not only in that, but, people say that you should learn math, not necessarily to do math, but because it teaches you how to think logically and all that.
Yeah.
I feel like there's an element of that in programming too. It's definitely good for you to challenge the way you approach problems and how you think about things.
Yes. And to break problems down into logical steps, right? I think that's a really important part of it. Is you have this big problem, say you want to design a video game. I think it's really important just to go through the thought process of breaking that down into, okay, well, how would I do this part and this part? And people have come up with techniques to do that, and it's just an important way to think logically and to break a problem down into its component parts.
Yeah. So let's start with, if we could turn back the clock, what would we do? For me, I remember being interested in programming in high school, and then I didn't ever really start doing it until I think my freshman year of college, when I took a class in it. And I think it, despite everything we just said, I think there was this mental block for me where I didn't think I could just make something. Mm-hmm. I felt like I needed somebody to get me started before I could really start digging into stuff. So I think looking back at it, that's probably the biggest thing I would if I could tell myself something, is to say hey, you can just install this stuff and just start making something and just try to figure something out.
Yeah. I think that's really common. I think a lot of people think what we do is witchcraft or something.
Yeah.
They don't understand how you get from typing things to running code on a computer, and they think it's like something that you really have to, I don't know, some kind of magic or something.
And granted, it was a little harder at the time. I mean, I remember like installing Visual Studio, not VS Code, but like the big old Visual Studio, and then installing a bunch of like C++ redistributables and everything, and then nothing working at first, and then having to like reinstall stuff and rebooting and all this. And then by the end of it, I was like printing stuff in a console, which I otherwise wouldn't ever open my console for, so I didn't really feel like I was really doing anything.
Yeah.
You know, now it's like we have all these like GUI frameworks and stuff, and I feel like it's a little bit easier to just get stuff installed and going and running off rip.
As much as we gripe about NPM and pip and all these kind of like package installation stuff, all that stuff has made it so much easier. It's just so much easier to get up and running when you can, you know, the first minute of the YouTube tutorial is just going to say, pip install this package, and now we have like something we can work with.
Yeah.
Not perfect, but way easier than it used to be for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I kind of had the opposite where I thought I was kind of interested, and I did kind of teach myself, and I totally thought it was possible, and but I think I've said in previous episodes, like I think I kind of missed out on something. I think if I were to go back and do it, I would find some way to get a more like holistic view of everything. I kind of had this piecemeal approach where whatever I wanted to do in a moment, I would find some way to do it, and I would just kind of hack something together, and without worrying about like good programming technique or maintainability or anything like that. I think a lot of what you learn in computer science, like if you're getting a degree, is how to make sure that like somebody else could look at your code and not think you're crazy, that kind of stuff. It's like hygiene, I guess you'd call it.
Yeah, there's stuff that even today I still struggle with. How do I learn? Like specifically when it comes to like DevOpsy stuff, because like you don't really, I mean, unless you have a project already, you don't really like. I mean, I guess I could just throw together like a CI pipeline for fun. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe I'm just not interested enough in it. But I do like feel like there's stuff I don't know about. Like I still don't really know what a Kubernetes is.
Yeah.
And I don't really know how I would go about learning it or why. You know, like what do you really do with it? I don't know.
Well, that's maybe a good segue to what we were talking about a minute ago, which is like there's a lot of things you learn about in programming and in computer science that I think only make sense in really large scale projects. Like they don't make a lot of sense when you're learning them. And I don't know if kids are learning Kubernetes in school these days or learning AWS in school, but like I think that stuff really only makes sense when you get to a certain scale with your project. And I think that it's really hard to kind of like simulate that in a learning environment.
I think even something like Git, like I remember hearing about Git, but in college, all my projects were just me. And so I would have like, I think a lot of our projects were submitted on a flash drive too.
Yeah.
So a lot of my projects were, you know, code.py, code-edit.py, code-edit-final.py. Like there was a lot of that going on. And it was horrible. And I wish I would have used something else.
Git is a funny one because I feel like I won't say every, most of the new hires that I encounter at work don't know about Git. And I feel like that's a thing that should be taught in school, but maybe it's a thing that's really hard to teach about in school because, it's hard to teach about unless the project is big.
I saw a video recently, I think it was Theo, who's a YouTuber who talks about programming, and he was saying that as well. He was saying that, like, if you don't know Git, that's just like a huge red flag to me that you don't even. He was going really hard. He was like, if you don't know Git, you don't even like programming. You don't even like. You should just go home, basically. It's kind of what it is. Maybe I'm overstating things a little bit, but okay. So I would like to dive into like the formal education thing because I feel like this is a hot topic in programming. It has been for a long time. I remember even when I was like researching where I wanted to go to college and stuff, people online and people I knew in person would say, "Oh, you didn't have to do all that. You just got to learn stuff. You just got to learn how to add value. You don't need to go get a degree and get in debt and all this stuff."
Yeah.
And I did go to college, and I seemed to be one of the few people who had a pretty favorable view of my time there. And I attribute a lot of that to being the expectations I had going in, right? I had heard all those things going in. And I feel like a lot of the people I went to college with did have this idea of, oh yeah, you go to college and they teach you everything, and then you walk into a job and that's it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I never had that. I always knew like it 100% is you get out of it what you put into it, right? Like you can totally get a degree without learning a damn thing if you want to.
Yeah.
And that happens a lot, I think. But I would say I'm generally pretty pro college for even if you just like 100% you want to do software, you want to be a programmer. I think it's worth it. I think it's worth your time to go do.
So yeah, what do you think you got out of college? It sounds like you didn't start programming until college, so obviously you got exposure to programming in general. But what do you feel like was what did you get out of it?
I think, well, okay. First of all, I studied engineering, not computer science.
Right.
So programming was just like part of what I did. And really, when I think back at it, I think the most valuable classes I took were those. I think probably my most valuable class was speech. I think I got a lot out of my speech class. I think I came out of that like being way better at talking in front of people.
Was this a public speaking kind of thing?
It was just a speech class. I mean, it was a requirement for I think it's a requirement for like every degree in the whole school. And like, did you ever take a speech class in high school?
Nope.
Man, dude, that was a requirement in my high school as well. But yeah, I mean, you just have to like pick a subject and give a speech on it. And
I guess we did some of that just in English class, but no, I never had a dedicated class for that.
Yeah. Speech class was good, and I mean, and yeah, I would present stuff in other classes, which was good. And I think, I mean, I don't know. I guess I would make use of my professor's office hours pretty extensively.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would spend a lot of time one-on-one with my professors, to the point that they were like annoyed with me. And I think that helped me a lot. Like, I think, like, I mean, kind of like I was saying before, like I struggled a lot with like self-doubt and stuff. And so I think just being able to go to someone and say, hey, look, I don't think I get this. And being able to like have that one-on-one time, I think that helped me a lot just with getting stuff. But I mean, that's a good question. Like, is there any like programming, like, okay, if you're being totally honest, like, I don't think there's any like hard knowledge I got out of college that I couldn't have gotten from somewhere else.
Yeah.
Especially with like all the online, like there's like entire MIT courses on YouTube and stuff. If you just followed along, did all the assignments and everything, I think you could totally teach yourself if that's what you really wanted to do.
I think that's a big part of it, though, knowing what you want to do. Like, college gave you, college exposed you to programming. It sounds like you kind of were starting down a different path and got exposed to programming, and you're like, oh, I kind of really like this.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's a lot of it. I kind of just ended up like fumbling my way into like the more software side, realizing that part of it was that was where all the jobs were at.
Yeah.
And part of it was I kind of like took to it better than I think a lot of my other other students did. I kind of struggled with a lot of the stuff that they were good at, like the circuit design and like power engineering and all this stuff. I don't even remember any of it. But yeah. Like And people talk about that. Like, okay, I would say, like, I don't recommend going to college if you know, there are people who go to college and they just take like all the gen ed classes and they don't even know what they want to do at all. I don't think that's a good idea. Like, I don't think it's good to like spend $20,000 a year figuring out who you are.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if I would recommend that. Because it depends a lot on who you are. And, like, I don't think college is for everyone. Absolutely. There are people who hate being in a classroom, and that's, yeah, don't go be in a classroom then, you know.
Yeah.
Do something you like that you're good at.
So, yeah, but that's kind of an interesting. It's kind of an interesting middle path, right? So if you know exactly what you want to do, you think college is probably not for you. But also, if you have no idea, college is probably not for you. It's kind of like if you have some idea of the direction you want to go, maybe like something as broad as like I want to go into STEM.
Yeah.
And then you can.
Well, I mean, that's kind of what I was feeling.
Yeah.
I was kind of like, hey, you know, I like computers, I like technology. Sounds like a good path. And I studied electrical and computer engineering and then kind of decided that I wanted to do computer science. Because that's another thing. A lot of people have like the wrong idea about universities and what they are and how things work. And okay, I think this episode I think is about to get way more meta than we were planning.
Excellent.
Okay, so first of all, I think about this a lot. Like, when it comes down to like what you want to do in life, how you do it is usually pretty easy to figure out. I think with most goals, I'm just talking generally. Like, there's a lot of stuff out there about how to lose weight. I think anyone listening to this knows what they have to do to lose some weight. Not necessarily to be the perfect body that they want, but like, if you want to lose weight, you need to like reduce your caloric intake, do some exercise, sleep 8 hours a night. And there's a lot of stuff about diets, what's healthy, what's not. I can tell you right now, the grilled chicken salad is good, okay, and the McDonald's is bad, right? I don't know.
Right.
We're always going back and forth on eggs and milk and stuff, but I'll just like, we mostly know what we need to eat, right? The thing is, most people don't know what they want. That I think is the hard part. Like, if you were born knowing you wanted to be the best software developer in the world, I think you would get there. Like, not easily, but pretty simply, right?
You think with or without college? Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe you would figure out that you wanted to go to college or not, but I just think like how you get success if you know what you want. I'm not talking about being like top 10 in the world, but like if you really love basketball and you know you want to play basketball, I think it's relatively easy to find a lifestyle where you play basketball as either you spend a lot of time doing it or you do it as a job, as a coach or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, how do I learn programming? I don't think is as challenging as figuring out that, yeah, you want to do programming. That's what you really want to do. I think that was my biggest roadblock, was for some reason I couldn't admit to myself that was the thing that I really wanted to do. I wanted to explore other things and all that.
So when it comes to like getting a new person into programming, you think maybe like the most important part is just exposing them to it, like showing them that that's the option and seeing if they have some kind of aptitude for it?
I think so, because look at how many threads there are online about what language do I learn, what framework do I learn.
Yeah.
The most important thing is that you pick one and do it for more than like a day, because I used to do that a lot.
Yeah.
I would hop into different ones, and I wrote a for loop in like a different one all the time. And for some reason, I couldn't just pick one. Like, really, if you pick one and you know get to the point where you build something for real, I think that's way more valuable than what you pick.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So how do you figure out what you want to do? Like, how do you? Maybe that's too big a question, but how do you do that? And do you think that college helps with that? Do you think that college helps you figure out what you want to do?
I don't know. I mean, yeah, that's a really good question, you know? And also, like, how do you figure out what you want to do? I still don't really know if I figured out what I want to do.
Yeah,
you know?
Same here.
I think about, like, do I want to keep doing this, or do I want to move more into that kind of thing? Is it time to change jobs? Should I stick with this one for a while? You know, you're always going to think stuff like that. So I don't know.
I think that's why a lot of people recommend like kind of starting with the lifestyle you want and working backwards, like kind of based on what you have an aptitude for a little bit, you know?
Right. Yeah.
It's like if you are kind of naturally good at something and you're able to get a job doing that, that's about the best you can hope for. Like,
yeah. Right.
that what you want to do? Like you said, you can kind of question that, I think, forever. But if you have a job that is giving you the lifestyle you want and you have some kind of ability for it, maybe that's as good as it gets.
Maybe. But I also have, like, I think this might be a little bit of a hot take about just universities in general. I tend to disagree with this idea that a lot of people have that college is like a job training program, right? That it's like, people say, I went to college and I didn't learn anything that I use in my job. And I understand why people say that, but I think that's just, you completely approach the whole thing incorrectly. Like, what is the definition of academia? I don't know. I'll have to look. But I don't think it has anything to do with jobs, right?
Yeah, I think that idea is a fairly modern notion, I would think.
It is. I mean, like, when you look at, like, early universities it was all about pushing science forward. And, I mean, it used to be kind of expected that you would be at the forefront of your field at a university, right?
Right. This is to train, this is kind of to push the field forward, to be doing research that's kind of like what PhDs are designed to do, right? Is to create new research in the field and kind of push the boundary a little bit. Is that what you think that universities are still for these days?
No. So I think what happened was that's how they existed. And then at some point, people figured out, on average, people who go to these institutions are good at these types of jobs. So we should hire more of them. Mm-hmm. And then at some point, someone started putting as a job requirement that you have to have a degree in this thing. And then slowly the whole thing just became diluted. And so now college is almost like an extension of your general education from like high school, right?
Right. Yep, exactly. It's kind of, at least where I went to high school, it was very much expected that you go to college, and that was just the next step.
Academia is the life, community, or world of teachers, schools, and education. So unless you want to be a teacher as a job, it's really not a job thing, right?
So how then, okay, this is good. How then do we prove, if I'm a hiring manager, how do I find the people who are going to be good in the job? Because I think that's what, a lot of hiring managers love the degree because it's the proof that you, at the very least, have some exposure to the ideas that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis in this job, right? And the coding camps, the boot camp stuff kind of tried to do the same thing. It was like, this person has, they don't have a degree, but they have been exposed to the ideas. Maybe that's good enough for the job that you're doing. Yeah,
and hiring clearly is like a very difficult thing to do because, people complain about hiring processes all the time now. There's like really difficult leak code type questions that don't really apply to the job. So, how do you hire? I don't know, dude. But, on paper, it would seem that the job training boot camp people would be better for jobs than the academic people, right? But in my experience, that's not the case.
I've also found that not to be the case.
For me, the best developers I've worked with have been completely self-taught or they went to college. And the worst I've worked with, I think, have been either they went to college or they did a boot camp. I don't think I've ever met like a bad self-taught developer, really, that I can think of.
I think that has a lot to do with just hours spent. You know what I mean? I think the self-taught developers have put in the hours because they were interested in doing it themselves, in a lot of cases. I think that whether you went to college or not doesn't really translate to how much time did you spend actually engaging with the ideas. It's totally possible to go to college and get the degree and come out the other end not really having engaged with any of those ideas. But I think that a lot of times the boot camp stuff, at least in my experience, is just this like real cursory overview, and you just haven't put in the hours that are necessary in order to gain mastery over something, I guess.
Yeah. And I feel the same way. I feel like the boot camps are like almost dangerous in a way, because I feel like it's like people learn enough to be dangerous. They learn enough to... You've seen that graph, right, where it's like how much you think you know over time, and it's like it spikes up and then it dips down.
Yeah.
I feel like right after you come out of a boot camp is when you're at the top of that peak.
Yeah.
Right? And you get your first job and you think like, oh, we can redesign this whole thing. We know everything. There's ways to do this and all that, and you just have no idea that, like, what you don't know.
Do you think they're just doing it wrong? Because from the first part of the conversation, it almost sounded like, if college isn't really the place to be trained for a job, the boot camp method almost sounds like the right method,
Yeah, well, I mean, I recommend people to go to college because it seems like, well, I think you do want some academic background, right? Mm-hmm. I think you want to spend some time just with these concepts. And I think that that foundation is good. I feel like a lot of boot camp, I mean, I've never done a boot camp, but I get the feeling that a lot of them probably just are not very good.
Yeah. That's kind of my impression too. I also have never done one, but yeah, my impression is that a lot of them are like borderline scams.
Yeah, I think some of them definitely are. And colleges get such a bad rap, I feel, specifically in the programming community. Mm-hmm. And again, I get it, but I mean, okay, maybe for-profit colleges, I mean, there's a lot of overlap there with like the boot camp thing in a way. But like, I went to a state school, and if you think about like a nonprofit college or a state-run college, their motivations are in the right place, right? Like, I don't think a state college wants to steal my money.
Yeah.
I think it's still really expensive and probably shouldn't be, but it's like a boot camp has a motivation there, right? To pump in through as many people as possible. And maybe they all get jobs, or maybe they don't. Maybe they're good. Really, they get jobs, but maybe they're not good at their jobs, maybe they're not. But I feel like colleges have like good intentions there.
Like pure motives.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree that going to college has kind of a bad rap in the programmer community for some reason. Do you think that like the gen ed requirements as part of your college degree were a part of that? Do you feel like having a more well-rounded higher education was beneficial to like becoming a better programmer in some way?
See, it's weird because, like I said, I think my speech class was probably my most valuable class.
Yeah. And
it was a gen ed requirement. But I think most of my gen ed requirements were a huge waste of time. And I think that's probably part of, or at least that's definitely a detriment of colleges, right? Because, like you were talking about, like time you spent in the field, with the subject matter itself. I remember in college thinking, I can't do that because I have all these papers due in these English classes and stuff, right? Like a lot of, as an engineering student, it's very much like a survival thing, right? It's very much like drinking from a fire hose. Maybe you learn some stuff will stick with you, but you're mostly trying to survive the whole thing. And I think some people, and engineering is different from programming, right? And I think maybe that's part of it intentionally for engineering, is it's almost like this rite of passage of like, okay, if you can survive that, then you can get through our project deadlines and shit that we make people do. So I don't know. I mean, I definitely enjoyed some of my gen ed stuff, but some of it I feel like was a waste of time.
Yeah.
But I do think, kind of going back to like the math example, right, of just learning just for like training your brain, I do think there's something about just learning anything, right?
Yeah.
Just learning how to learn. I mean, this is something I've been thinking about with the baby, right? Like, not yet, but as he gets older, there's a lot of emphasis on like making learning fun, right? And like, I've been watching all these videos about how Cocomelon is like really bad for you, like really bad for kids apparently. I don't know if any of this is true, but like, I do wonder, right? Like, if we make learning super fun, like, does that rob us the ability to learn when something isn't fun to learn?
Right. When you have to buckle down and you're not really digging it, and like, do you lose the ability just like power through it?
Because that, I think, is a skill. That's a hard skill that I developed in college. Of like, I have to do this by tomorrow. I'm 18 years old. I really want to play video games, but I have to learn this by tomorrow. I have this test, and I have to know how to do all this tomorrow. Right? There's something I gained from that for sure.
Was it so you came out of high school without that skill? Do you feel like it was because the first time you were on your own? I can't remember. Did you go away to college?
No, so I stayed at home when I was in college, and that kind of coincides with what I was saying. Like, I went into college with these what I feel are like realistic expectations, and I went in very cautiously, right? Because I heard all these things about like, oh, they take all your money, and so one of my big things when I was like thinking about what I wanted to do was like, okay, I'm going to study something I can get a job in, and I'm going to stay somewhere where I can afford it. So I went to a local state college.
Yeah.
Which I kind of, sometimes I regret. Sometimes I think maybe I should have gone somewhere with like, where I would have been exposed to like more smarter people and more stuff going on. Like, I remember in college hearing about like, we had a jobs fair at our college, but then at bigger schools, they have a jobs fair and it's like, it's a whole different thing. You know what I mean? Like, huge company, like, okay, like, so I went to UMKC, right? The jobs fair there is like local stuff. Mm-hmm. It's like Cerner and like, local companies. Like the jobs fair at Rolla, Missouri S&T, the jobs fair there is like, it's like Apple, it's Microsoft, it's Tesla.
Oh, really?
It's just a different level. So I do sometimes, and I feel like I would have had more of an experience being away from home, but yeah, I just spent way more money. So this is, I think, one of the big problems with just talking about education in general is that everyone only knows what they did.
Yeah.
Right. And people ask me for advice a lot of like, should I go to college? Should I learn this? Should I learn this? And I'm just like, all I can tell you is what I did. Right. I went to college and I feel like I'm glad I did. But I don't know you. Like, I don't really know. Like, do you think you learn well in a classroom setting? Do you think you need to go somewhere else? Like, I think it would have been better if I was in a different state somewhere. But also, I don't know. Maybe I would have gone to another state and like lost my mind. I knew kids in college that actually were like that. I knew there was a kid who transferred like my junior year, and he had no hair. He was like bald, and then he let his hair grow, and his hair was like all patchy and stuff. And so I always wondered about it. One day I was like, dude, I just have to like what's going on there? And he actually developed this rare condition where his hair was falling out from stress.
Oh.
Because he had transferred here from another school, and he was going to some other college, and he was living on his own, and he was working full time, and his hair started falling out, and he failed all his classes, and then he transferred here, and then was doing that.
Oh, wow.
And I heard stories like that a lot. People who like, oh yeah, I went to Nebraska or whatever. I went to so-and-so university and started drinking a lot. I don't really remember much, but now I'm here. So I don't know, maybe that would have been me.
Yeah, totally. A lot of people, I know at least one person who, kind of went away and then was like, oh, I hate this. I hate being away from my family and my home. And
I knew people who just got depressed just being away. So, I don't know.
That's a really good point, though, about, we can only comment on our own experiences. And mine is like very dissimilar from yours. And I didn't go to college, and it worked out okay for me in the end. And I like the part where I didn't spend the money on college, but I do always wonder, I don't know, would I have been better off going to college? I think I do learn well in a classroom setting. I think that's not really the issue for me. And like I said, I think maybe I would have benefited a lot from being exposed to like a more, I don't know, just a more well-rounded, even within programming, I think it being exposed to a more well-rounded kind of thing instead of just this piecemeal thing that I kind of like hacked together myself.
Yeah. I do feel like I have a similar thing there, though, like, because a lot of the computer science courses I never took, like database, I never took a database class. I never took like a real algorithmy class, right? I took classes in the programming stuff was just like basically like a programming 101 type thing, and then I took a lot of like low level stuff. I had a class where in the lab we actually wrote assembly, and stuff that your average computer science student probably didn't do. And there's a lot of stuff they did that I didn't do.
I feel like databases, honestly, are the other one. When I meet a new grad, it's Git and it's databases. I feel like those are the two missing pieces for a lot of them that just feel like so essential and that feel like they should be taught in school and often aren't.
So that's the thing. That's what started me on this tangent. I remember now. So Git, I think some people argue that's like a job training more than like an academic thing, right? I remember like within electrical engineering, there's this kind of debate about if PLC programming should be included in electrical engineering degrees, which PLCs are basically like in like factories and warehouses, like those panels, just the simple programmable logic controllers. So just the little controllers that do all the conveyor belts and stuff.
Okay.
Which is, it's a really big thing. Like if you go to a trade school, they'll have like a PLC programming class, right? Because it's mostly pretty simple. But that's a debate, right? That people say like, well, if the world needs PLC programmers and you'll get a job doing that, we should teach that. But then the academic side is like, well, that's not really, that's just like teaching someone how to do a job more than like, and one of the arguments also is like, okay, if you can program a computer, you can use a PLC.
Gotcha.
But then again, I mean, like if you ever look at like PLC jobs that are hiring, they're like, okay, we want somebody who has 2 years of experience with this,
With something, they want to know that you have like some theory behind it, not just that you've been taught how to do the PLC and that's it.
That's what like the academic types want. Like the like hiring people, it sounds like they want people who know how to, like they have experience using Siemens PLCs or Rockwell Automation PLC suite, whatever,
Gotcha. It's like a specific piece of software.
Yeah. Which is like, I don't know, it's a weird kind of blurry thing.
What do you think? Do you think Git is a job thing, or do you think that's an essential skill? That's a really interesting question, actually. Now that
so for me, I think like I feel like it would be cool if they did like in the very beginning of the degree program, if they did just like a seminar, because you don't need to take like a class on Git,
right?
Like one seminar, maybe 2 or 3, just to teach. Like this is what this is how it works. And I almost feel like they should teach that to everyone, because like how many essays did I write that was like where I had the one where I did this citing sources strategy and the one where I did this one, and then I made edits on both, and I had branches. Like I've had branches with essays I've written for English classes.
Yeah, 100%.
So I almost wonder like should we just teach Git to everyone?
I would vote yes. I think that's a great idea.
Society, if everyone knew Git, like it's just, we were just living in Star Trek world.
Well, when you were talking about that dude who was talking about new grads showing up and not knowing Git, and that's a deal breaker, it's like, yeah, a couple thoughts there. One is, like you were just saying, I don't think it takes very long to learn the basics, right?
Right.
It's like, okay, you don't know Git, I will teach it to you. By the end of the week, you'll be committing code. It's not it's not a big deal in that sense. But I think, even compared to like 10 years ago, Git is so much more, well, Git and GitHub are just so much more pervasive. Like, how many people who are not in computer science but are digging through data sets, right? they're available on GitHub, and it's
Yeah.
important to know how to pull them down and what it means to commit a change and put in a pull request and that kind of stuff. Yeah, I absolutely think that that's a more widely applicable skill than just CS grads.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's the solution. Just teach everyone Git. Everyone just learn Git. And also, I remember when I started working with you, I didn't know Git, but I had used Microsoft. I think it was just called like Microsoft Source Control or something like that, and it's like integrated in Visual Studio. I don't know if it even still exists,
Yeah, I've never even heard of that.
but it worked basically the same as Git, like theoretically. But I did everything through a GUI. I don't know if there even is like a CLI version. So I had like somewhat of a concept of source control.
Okay, so
Maybe that's it. Maybe there should be a source control class. We
Yeah.
don't learn Git. We don't learn Mercurial. We don't learn anything specific. We just talk about the theory of source control as a concept.
I think that's a great idea.
So then you show up at a job and you like know about branches and branching structures, and because that's another thing. Like a lot of jobs expect you to know software development lifecycle stuff, which is like obviously they don't teach that at schools really, unless maybe like there's like a master's degree in like business management for software or something.
Right, that's almost more project management stuff.
Right. That's another thing. I don't know. Like, can you self-teach that? Can you teach yourself that? No.
That's another one that's like, oh, I'm practicing Jira. It's like, what are you doing? Creating tickets for yourself?
Yeah.
That's a really, really hard thing to teach yourself without some kind of like large organization or large code base that you're working with.
Yeah. Jeez. So anyway, if you were going to learn programming today, let's say you forgot programming, what would you do?
Python's the answer.
Really? So I remember I wrote a blog post. I had a blog for a little while, and I wrote a blog post about how I kind of think it should be like C or something. I feel like
Oh,
Python is like so easy that it like messes you up in a way.
okay. So this is what kind of got me thinking about this topic was I think to get someone interested in programming, you want to get from the typing things on the keyboard to actually doing something fun and interesting in the shortest time possible. And I think that Python is the right answer for that.
You don't want to scare people away.
Yeah, I think that there's just a lot of things about C that I think if you were, cast your mind back to like, you don't know anything about programming, there's just a lot of things that seem kind of archaic and weird.
Yeah.
You got to put
Yeah.
your conditions in parentheses and everything's in brackets. And like, I just think Python seems more natural. And the time that it's going to take you to get from, when I say doing something fun, I think what I have in mind is an interactive program.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's a GUI,
Yeah.
maybe it's a text prompt, maybe it's something, but like something that feels like you're interacting with the computer. That's like, I just really feel like there's a moment there where you have a chance to really grab someone's attention, and they're going to be like,
Absolutely, yeah.
"Oh man, this is a lot of fun." Then you can back up and be like, "Okay, so there's different types of data, and you can like you can't compare an integer to a string, and like."
Yeah,
I
I think like I think of like the first time I opened my browser, went to root and saw text that I wrote, was like, whoa, this is something. I never really felt that with like terminal apps, little calculator thing.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, what is this? But yeah.
I still remember the first time I set up like I think it was like a Postgres instance or something, and I created a web app and I read something from a database. Yeah, the web page displayed data that I didn't type in. It was like data from this database. It felt like magic.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a good argument for. Do you think Python is the language for that, for getting something on the screen as fast as possible? I think it's definitely a good candidate.
I think maybe I'm a little biased. I'm a big fan of Python in general, and I use it on the daily. Maybe there are other arguments for other stuff. Maybe Ruby's similar. I don't know if there's anything easier than Python. You know what I mean? Like the simplest Python program is literally one line where you print something to the screen. I don't know that it gets much easier than that.
Yeah. Yeah. So the first programming class I took actually really wasn't composed very well. So it was, we learned 3 languages at once.
That seems extremely confusing.
And so it was C and it was Python and it was MATLAB.
Oh.
Because again, this is an engineering program. And it was like, it wasn't CS 101. It was like Introduction to Engineering Computations, I think was the name of the class or something. So it was like, okay, here's programming that you might be doing while you're going through like electrical engineering stuff. Because MATLAB is huge in that world.
Okay.
MATLAB is like not really used for like actual programming, like outside of an academic setting. MATLAB is like hard to even explain, like if you've never used it, because it's you have to buy a license, and it has like it's like a whole software suite, and it has the language is like tailored to this software, and I don't know, it's almost, I guess the closest thing I could use to explain it is like those game engines that like have their own language.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's almost something like that, but it's all about there's a bunch of crazy math stuff. It does a bunch of crazy calculus, and like you can put linear equations in there and it'll make a graph, and it's for that kind of stuff.
Right, and the graphing and the IDE are all part of like the package.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So you can just put a function, you can just put like f of x equals x if x plus b, whatever, and then I think there's just a button for plotting. Maybe you have to type out plot, whatever, and it has a very bare bones syntax, right? Because it's not really for like programmers.
Yeah.
And then you can just print a thing. And we use it in a lot of our labs for like signal processing stuff that I can't even remember anymore. But I remember in that class, we would do Python, we would do MATLAB, and then we would do C. And it was like, okay. Like, the first one was like, it was all the classic, like, we did I think we made a calculator app. I think we made a function for like, doing some simple physics problem or something, printing stuff to the console kind of stuff. And even just that, it was like, the Python stuff was like a couple lines, and the MATLAB stuff was maybe even less. And the C stuff was, you had to import something, and then you had to like remember where to put the semicolons though.
Yeah.
The only thing with Python is you sometimes you wouldn't have as many spaces as you needed, and that would bug me.
I can see that being annoying, but I almost feel like that's only annoying if you've used other programming languages, right? If somebody tells you when you want to indent, it's 4 spaces, like for now, just that's all you need to know.
Yeah. And with a modern IDE, it's like it just does that for you.
Yeah.
Like it's not, you don't have to hit 4 spaces. So, yeah.
But, there are other things too that I'm kind of leaving out of this conversation, like Scratch. Have you ever messed around with that?
Yeah, and I was thinking about that. I haven't used it, but I've heard that's supposed to be like for learning, right?
I did like a volunteer thing one time where we were teaching with Scratch, and I hadn't used it, unfortunately, so I don't know much about it, but I mean that's what it's for. It has like blocks of code that you kind of like plug in together. I don't know, maybe that's a better place to start, but again, I just feel like
it's like a visual programming thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you plug it's a visual programming thing where you plug almost like a node-based environment, I think. And you plug the blocks into each other, and so it teaches you about control flow and things like that.
How about Minecraft Redstone?
Sure. Is that just Java?
That's like in Minecraft.
There's a language in Minecraft?
Basically, yeah. So there's like
you're gonna have to. Yeah, I don't know.
So you can like build circuits in Minecraft with redstone. It basically works like electricity, like The redstone is like a battery, and you could build lines of it, and you can like build switches in the game, and like do people have made all kinds of crazy stuff.
I think I've seen this, like people build hard drives.
Yeah, yeah, and the crazy stuff. I don't even know. I mean, like the idea of redstone. It's been a long time since I played Minecraft, but the idea was like you hook up this redstone switch to this door, and then you could like open the door from over here. Right?
Oh, I see.
That's the idea. So you can control something. There's like mine carts in the game, so you can do some simple stuff like that. But then people have just gone nuts and simulated entire FPGAs and whatever in Redstone.
And
but I've heard people say like, yeah, everything I know about programming I learned in Minecraft Redstone tutorials.
That seems like the hard way to me. But I don't know, if you're already playing Minecraft and that kind of piques your interest, sure.
Well, the ironic thing about it is it's really high level, right? Because you're in a video game. But the principles of it are super low level because you're really implementing all the binary logic from bottom up, right? Like, so.
Yeah, no, I mean the fact that it takes place in the video game is kind of crazy. But yeah, it's just ones and zeros. It's just like starting.
A redstone is either on or off. That's it.
That's kind of nuts.
You'll have to look up some videos like stuff people build with redstone.
Okay, well, there's a whole thing that I wanted to get into here. Maybe we'll just touch on it real quick. But we're at 53 minutes, so I almost feel like this is its own episode here. But do you feel like your recommendations for someone learning programming, do you feel like any of this changes with AI? Because there was a time when I was said, like I was saying earlier, everyone needs to learn a little bit of programming. It's just going to help you navigate the world as it stands today. And these days, I don't know. I'm a little bit hesitant to say that. I think AI is going to play a bigger part in every coding job, every programmer's life. Like, maybe it's not as essential that you actually know how to get in there and do the programming. Maybe it's more essential that you become like a prompt engineer or whatever,
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the only thing I'll say is I have a friend who's doesn't work in software, but he's done a little bit of programming, and we worked on a little project recently, and he was telling me that he thought for him, like, I think he used ChatGPT. He said that was just the biggest game changer for him. Like, as someone who's like not really good at it, to be able to say, give me something that does this, and then being able to tweak it from there. Getting that starting point. And I talked about the kind of the nervousness I had in the beginning. Like, I wonder if that would have helped me get over that. If I had someone there, basically professor's office hours all the time, I could just say, hey, I don't know what this bug is. Can you help me?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. I don't know that we know the answer to that yet, but I think kind of what prompted that in my head was I read an article that can't remember where it was from, but maybe I'll find it for the show notes. It was this guy was a programmer, and his friend was not a programmer, and he was working on this project with his friend, and his friend was just like coming to him with this code. He was like, hey, I wrote this app. He was like, what do you mean you wrote an app? Like, you don't know how to program. And his friend was using ChatGPT and just, kind of just that tweaking. And with a couple hours of tweaking was able to come up with like entire iOS apps and stuff. Stuff that would have been, I don't know.
Was this code any good though?
It worked. That's going to be the thing. That's going to be the thing with all of the ChatGPT written code, right? Is like it's going to be fine until it crashes on a random Wednesday because that's the longest day of the week or something.
Yeah, and we'll just have to wait and see, I guess.
Okay, not as long as I thought.
I mean,
we'll wait and see.
We'll have to wait and see. But what can you say? But I think it's changed the game for learning programming for sure.
Yeah, I think so too.
I am nervous about students using it to get through all their assignments, but that's a problem that's been there. You know, I mean, you always could have just asked Stack Overflow or whatever.
Yep. And and lots of people did that.
Yeah.
That's true. Well, you got anything else for this episode?
Do you think that installing Linux? I saw a tweet just recently. Someone said like installing Linux was the best thing he ever did for learning about computers.
Oh. That was not my experience. Huh. What was his justification for that?
I mean, that was the tweet. I'm sure he probably left a comment.
That's it. That's the tweet.
And I think he's being dramatic, if anything. But I will say, like, just like anything, you know, they say the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is right now.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that way with, you know, everything I do. Like, because now I don't use Windows at all. And yeah, it would be cool if I was using Linux as a kid and I was that much more fluent with it. But gaming on Linux was not a thing back then, really. So
yeah. I'll talk about my experience installing Linux, which was in 2000, was my first attempt. And when I tried to do that, my sound card didn't work, my modem didn't work. I couldn't, like, none of the hardware stuff really worked. It was like, I can't get on the internet and I can't make music, so I don't know, this probably isn't for me.
Yeah.
And I didn't try it again for another, I don't know, maybe 7 years, like whenever Ubuntu was kind of gaining popularity. So I had some exposure to it. Yeah, I don't know. I guess it was transformative in a way. I did transfer, you know, I kind of like moved over to using Linux exclusively. And now it's kind of like Linux or Mac, depending on where I'm at the moment. So, I don't know. I guess it was a pretty big deal.
yeah. So, whose side are you on?
Oh.
Is that what we call this segment?
Yeah.
Whose side are you? Okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
Well, I guess this isn't really. This is a bit more open-ended. What browser are we rocking with right now? Or what browser we're using?
I'm on Firefox.
Nice.
What about you?
I use a lot of different. At work, I use Chrome because I do web dev stuff, and it's just kind of like, you know, that I've been a Firefox web dev before, and like I tested it, it works. Oh, it doesn't work on Chrome, and that's what everyone uses. Well, okay, let me start over. So
Yeah.
at work, I just use Chrome. At home, I use Florp. I think I've told you about Florp.
That sounds familiar, yeah.
It's a Firefox fork.
Okay.
And it just has like some extra features and stuff. Probably my least favorite name for a product ever.
What kind of features, though?
The UI is a little different. It has like a sidebar. I can't think of anything specific, honestly. I don't think I really use any of them. Why do people use Florp? It's like 3 O's. Oh, it's 2 O's. FLOOR. So Floor P, basically.
Floor P.
Features: strong tracking protection, flexible layout, customizable design, regular updates, no user tracking, powered by open source. So all the things that Firefox has, basically. Dual sidebar. Are you not satisfied with just one sidebar? Want to open your website in the sidebar? Florp features a built-in sidebar that can display a web panel and browser management tools for comfortable. Yeah, it has a sidebar on the right, which is cool, I guess. I don't know. I use Florp. On what browser do you use on mobile?
Safari. I'm on iPhone, so I don't mess around with. Can you even install another browser?
You can. The thing is, supposedly they're all just Safari underneath, is my understanding.
That's what I thought. Yeah. They're using WebKit or whatever.
Yeah, but they are. I mean, they do different stuff. I use Orion right now, just because it's from the same people who made Kagi.
Okay.
So I'm like, hey, I think Orion also has an iOS browser, or a Mac OS browser. But you know, my Mac is my work computer, so I just use Chrome.
Just real quick, I lied. I use Chrome at work too. I have
Okay.
Firefox at home, Chrome at work. You're right. Wait, you pay for Kagi. Do you get Orion as part of that deal?
Orion is free.
Okay.
And it's just a regular browser, really. But I like Kagi so much, I just want to use all their stuff. I've used a lot of different mobile browsers before. I used to use one called Firefox Focus, which is different from regular Firefox.
I've heard of that.
The thing is, you can only have one tab, and I think it will clear every time you close it or something. I think it by default has no history. But one day I wanted to have another tab open, so I stopped using it.
What's a browser with 2 tabs?
Yeah, I mean, it's the idea is to bring it down so you're not getting distracted. I guess I don't know.
I like that idea. I find that most of the time my multiple browsers are not because I'm distracted by a million things, but because I want to save a YouTube video for later.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so that would be frustrating for me.
Yeah. All right. Is that it?
I think that's it.
All right. This has been 1X Developer Podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Catch you next time.
1X Developer Podcast.
Hey everybody, this is Colin. First and foremost, I want to thank you all for listening to this episode of the 1X Developer Podcast, and let you know that if you have any questions, comments, or if you just want to tell us about your day, you can reach us at X, formerly known as Twitter, at 1X Developer Podcast. We're also on YouTube at 1X Developer Podcast. You can email us if you're weird at 1xdeveloperpodcast at protonmail.com. And lastly, don't forget to follow, subscribe, all that stuff, so you don't miss any further episodes of the 1X Developer Podcast. Thanks so much. See you next time.